Mistakes. Everybody makes them, and some are more interesting than others. In this instance, for your consideration, we have a stray panel of Batman holding a gun from the Silver Age. He's brandishing it, threatening criminals with it. And this is something that has been against the core of Batman's character for a long time. It had already been so before this panel, and it would continue to be so after. So how did this happen, and why? It's an interesting tale and a cursed panel. I'm Sasha, this is Casually Comics, and this is Cursed Panels, where we take a look at individually standout, interesting, or controversial panels and put them in their context. Today's outing comes from Detective Comics 327 from the year 1964. It's come up a few times on this channel because it's a significant moment in Batman's history, although it may not appear to be so on the surface. But this issue marks the beginning of a new editorial era for The Dark Knight, as Jack Schiff is replaced by Julius Schwartz as editor. And Schwartz would go on to usher in a new heyday for Batman, who had been falling off in sales up to that point. Schwartz would institute many changes. They may not seem huge, but for the time, they made a big difference to the tone. The Silver Age is not monolithic, even though it tends to be regarded as such, but that happens with any era. Just for example, look at fashion of certain eras, where certain moments are highlighted, but there's always way more going on. The Silver Age, like all eras, was in motion. It wasn't stagnant. It wasn't just one thing. Now, as for Schwartz, he was on a quest to remove some of the sillier aspects of Batman lore. And it wasn't a bad decision. It ended up working for them. While characters like Bat-Mite, Ace the Bat-Hound, Batwoman, and the original Batgirl can be fun, and it's always nice to see them come back in some way over the years, at the time, in the early Silver Age, when they were being utilized the most, they had become a bit stagnant. They weren't really moving. Their stories were very repetitive. At some points, they were being used so frequently, it began to develop a bit of a rinse and repeat. And especially with characters like Batwoman and Batgirl, who were created to try and appease the likes of Frederick Wertham and people concerned about the concept that there could be any kind of deviancy happening in those books. All of this factored into how they have been re-examined and used over time, and looked at through different lenses. It may have also occurred if they'd still been kept in use, but it would have been different. That break and gap has certainly helped some of them, some more than others. For Batman 1964, it was time for a change. And then in 1966, the TV show came along, and that really boosted him up. But it must be known that this pivot, this change is sharp. You feel it. We go from issue 326, Captives of the Alien Zoo, which is exactly what it sounds like, straight to 327, The Mystery of the Menacing Mask, which moves back towards a more detective-style thriller crime story. Those have been moved away from because of the code, but also because of changes in taste and style. A lot was happening. It's very interesting. The point is, the tone between the two issues feels very different, but there are still some overall elements that mark it as Silver Age, like the loose science of the plot. This issue also boasted a new look for Batman and Robin. It's even advertised on the cover. I also know that Schwartz pulled the Elongated Man for a backup in this issue. Elongated Man was a character who he'd overseen the introduction of in the Silver Age Flash. There's also a bit more of a reason for it, though. He was trying to pair Batman with more detective-style backups to reinforce the idea that it was that kind of book, that Batman was the world's greatest detective. Schwartz had also been part of the group of creators tasked with overhauling some of their superheroes at DC to meet the Comics Code standards. Now, as for the story, it's not just about a menacing mask. In fact, it's very little about a menacing mask. It's a nice alliteration, though. This story is actually more about social issues and the preservation of historical neighborhoods, and whether that concern should be paramount if the area has been overrun with crime. In the middle of modern Gotham lies an anachronism, a relic of the past. Some call ancient Gotham Village a festering wound at the heart of the bustling metropolis. Others term it a historical landmark and valuable living area. Who is right? Both sides have strong adherents. For example, Andrew Wallace, head of the city's anti-crime commission. Gotham Village must be demolished, razed to the ground as it stands as a refuge for criminals who use its twisted streets and narrow alleys to elude police pursuit. But listen to Roland Meacham, chairman of the city's committee to preserve Gotham Village. If Gotham Village were torn down, thousands of people would be without homes. Besides, our neighborhood is colorful, picturesque, historical. It must be preserved. An area looks nice, that's why we gotta keep it. Yeah, as you can see, this is quite the whiplash from Alien Zoo. Bruce is all for preserving the area. He is vice chairman of the preservation committee. This is fully in line with Bruce's history, but the comic's not gonna acknowledge that. And there is a very good reason for that, so put a pin in it. We'll come back here. Bruce is accosted by a woman on the street who is screaming that she hates him. As a startled Bruce stares at the unknown girl. You're on the committee to preserve Gotham Village. I recognize you from your pictures in the paper, but you're doing a terrible thing. This awful place should be destroyed. She's crying. Please sit down, miss. I'd like to hear your reasons for your outburst. All right. I'll tell you. Bruce is being very understanding. That is a lot of understanding for just being screamed at on the street. Also note, him and Dick have matching trench coats. Okay, so this woman wants Gotham Village torn down because she thinks that it's dangerous, but her fiance wants to live there anyway. And when they had fights about it, he all of a sudden started vanishing into the night. Now she's convinced that he's become a criminal and it's the village's fault. Did the village turn Jimmy, that's his name, into a criminal? Who wants to tell her that if he turned into a criminal, tearing down the village won't fix that? I don't want to be that person. I doubt Bruce wants to be that person either. What does he do in the middle of the night? Where does he go? I can't help fearing that he's mixed up somehow with the criminal element that infests Gotham Village. Why, just the other day, after he left me, I found a map he dropped. A map of Gotham Village, and part of the area is circled with an X. This cartoon-style pirate map X, it marks the spot. And that spot is a flashback that it sends Bruce and Dick into. Because that X, the spot it marks, is on their foreheads. They have secret invisible X's on their foreheads. While out fighting crime, both Batman and Robin got marked with an X. Because Bruce wears a mask, it got on there, and it's Robin's skin, so it's just soaking up in there. But it faded after a few moments. That doesn't mean it's not there, though. Bruce examines this mysterious X and finds it's some kind of phosphorus isotope and radioactive. I'm so sorry that that's on your forehead, Dick. On the good news front, it can only be bought one place, so it's super easy to trace. They track down a cocky villain who's just waiting for them with a pile of jewels on the table. This is Frank Fenton. Batman and Robin. Hello there. I'm getting ready to leave for a perfect hideaway. But I kept stalling till you showed up. Fenton is somehow able to freeze them both in place. Now you see why I wait for you two to appear. I have absolute power over you both, Batman and Robin, and I wanted you to know it. From now on, whenever you try to stop me, you'll freeze, unable to make a move against me. I like this panel. It's very menacingly framed, even though this concept is very far-fetched. But Batman and his cave lounge chairs thinks that he's figured it out. He's got a solution, but we the reader won't be privy about it till later. They figure he's gonna hide in Gotham Village. As we've heard, it's all the hotness. That's why they were down there casing it out as Bruce and Dick. So this brings us back to the present, and now they have this map, and they see Jimmy, so why not follow him? And maybe the X is the secret hideaway, but also maybe that X has to do with their foreheads. It doesn't. That's just a coincidence. People use X's for things, Bruce. They tail Jimmy to the secret hideaway deep in the village, which was my favorite part of the issue. Because of the head criminal who's running it. Smiler, because he's always smiling. That's not why I liked him. I liked him because he was trying to turn their underground hideaway into a combination of a hotel lounge, but also a strip mall. Some crooks are so hot, they have to lie low for weeks. Down here, they don't get bored. We have our club where they can relax, see? And here's our deluxe movie theater, showing only crime films, of course. If you were on the run from the law, would you want to be constantly watching crime films, especially from this era where in the end, most of the time the gangsters die? I don't know. I feel like for me, that would stress me out, but maybe it could also be cathartic for some. Let's say you decide to take your loot and hightail it for the border. Well, you just see our special travel bureau and get every detail of your trip planned for you. Now, what's your answer, Fenton? Smaller needs to hire some artists to jazz up those posters. I'm not feeling the vibe. It's not as welcoming as the crime movie theater. Also, yes, the criminal he's talking to is Fenton, not Jimmy. Where is Jimmy? He's not here, but Fenton coincidentally is. So yeah, those X's have nothing to do with each other. Now, Fenton wants a discount because he says he has a way to deal with Batman and Robin, which he gets to demonstrate when they bust in and he freezes them in place. But psych, they already figured out how to escape his paralysis. But they're still very numbered and outgunned, which means it's time for our panel. Batman grabs one of the guns after it falls and uses it to subdue the criminals. First to regain his feet is swift-moving Batman, who grabs for a crook's gun. Fenton's the only one that hasn't tried to use a gun, but that fits in with his character. He's just not a killer. Or he would have finished off Robin and me the first time he had us in his power. And a few moments after the raging battle began, wow, he's really threatening them. Imposing. It just goes to show how ingrained the no gun or Batman has a problem with guns concept has become, that seeing panels like this always causes me a small internal gasp moment. And this one's different in how casual it is. Because when you have something like, say, Batman Odyssey, where everything is over the top, that's just one more out there moment. Or something like in Batman Beyond Rebirth, because there it's treated like a big deal. It's the moment that signals to him it's time to stop being Batman.
Never again.
But here, it's just treated as something completely normal, like something he does all the time, and that makes it stand out even more. Now, Batman does have a history with guns, but it's very brief. He used a gun to kill some vampires. Why did I make their fangs? He used a gun to kill some vampires in Detective Comics number 32, but most notably, he used them against humans, or well, monster men in Batman Comics number 1. But he felt bad about it. Much as I'm afraid to take human life, I'm afraid this time it's necessary. But that was the last time. Why? Because editor Whitney Ellsworth talked to Bob Kane and Bill Finger directly. He told them, among other things, that they had to implement a no-killing code, like had been implemented for Superman by his creators. In fact, in 1941, Ellsworth, who was the editor-director, implemented the DC Comics Editorial Advisory Board, and this came with an imprint-wide policy, which stated, heroes should never kill a villain, regardless of the depth of the villainy. The villain, if he is to die, should do so as the result of his own evil machinations. A specific exception may be made in the case of duly constituted officers of the law. The use of lethal weapons by women, even villainous women, is discouraged. It's not banned though, just discouraged. We don't like those dames with guns, but maybe, it depends. Bob Kane stated in the book Batman and Me that after issue 1, Ellsworth told them to never let Batman carry a gun again. Now, the rationales for this would come from a couple of angles. One was that it would taint the character and lower him to the level of the criminals that he fought. 2, that would be something that moms would not approve of. Yet another was that it was to move him away from the arena of the pulp vigilante, who were more morally gray, because there was a distinction that was rising between the two. The genres were starting to pull apart and separate. And Batman needed that, because at the start, he was very much the Shadow. Detective Comics number 27 is an instance of, let me copy your homework. But Batman did start to move away from that at a decent pace because of the things they started to add to him. Pulling back on guns, the addition of Robin, although Robin was already there by the time they banned guns. And by the time they'd taken guns away, it was 5 months. So it's not like he ran around wielding them willy-nilly. But he did kill, and they curbed back on that. Bill Finger felt that Batman should never have killed, stating, Batman shouldn't have ever had to kill people. Kane would go back and forth on it. One thing that Finger wanted to depict quite clearly was how much Bruce's parents' death had impacted him. He's the person who writes Batman number 47, where Batman confronts Joe Chill, revealing to him that he is Bruce Wayne. It has the very powerful moment where you see the direct line from the killing in the alley to Batman. Even though that was always there, they really hammer home the emotion of it in that issue, and that happens very early on. This moment has trickled down. They play with it in Batman Brave and the Bold verbatim.
I know because I am the son of the man you murdered. I am Bruce Wayne.
Now, in the Silver Age, Batman doesn't have the overt aversion and more extreme psychological response to guns as of yet. But the inference was there, the seeds were laid, and it was something that some inferred. And this was still an oddity because Batman didn't use weapons like this. It just felt odd. And it was something that people noticed. And most notably, it's something that Schwartz himself acknowledges, noting it as a mistake and a big one. In his autobiography, Man of Two Worlds from the year 2000, he gives the rationale for why this happened, saying that him and John Broome, the writer, weren't very familiar with Batman's mythos. And this is where we need to pull out our pin. You can see that in other moments earlier in the issue. For example, when Bruce is on that committee and it's not linked back to what happened to him, because as seen from that Finger issue, there was already a precedent of linking things back to Bruce's past and that trauma. So the fact that that moment doesn't do that or make a reference to how his parents died is a small indication that there isn't a deep knowledge of the lore yet. See, it's the little things. Now, Schwartz dedicated a section of his book to this moment. Get ready. This is a bit of a long quote, but it's worth it. Before I took over Batman had become more of a science fiction takeoff piece with robots and aliens all over the place, and I really hadn't been following the continuity. Thus, the first story of my Batman tenure had a big mistake in it that I didn't notice. I had asked my top writer at the time, John Broome, to do the job, and he more or less seemed to have the same lack of excitement for Bob Kane's creation as I did. So the two of us sat down together and carefully plotted a story for the Caped Crusader that was set in the Gotham City equivalent of Greenwich Village. There were two professionals not realizing that when it came to Batman, we were the blind leading the blind. The story was titled Mystery of the Menacing Mask, Detective Comics 327, and the mistake was that at the story's climax, Batman holds a gun on the crooks, and as everyone familiar with the book was quick to point out, this was something Batman would never do. There's so many interesting things to take from this quote, like the acknowledgement that he wasn't the biggest fan of the character coming into it, at least from the era preceding it. But you can see there's obviously some reverence for the Golden Age because that's the type of Batman that he tries to pull it back to. That's why a creator's fan status when coming onto a character is interesting to note, as it can have varied impacts. Also, he didn't say that he hated Batman, just that he wasn't overly enthused. What it seems to really depend on is whether that person can marry their knowledge of the character with a willingness and ability to also let them grow and change. Some people can, some people can't. And that can happen whether they're a fan or not. And that's why it's so fascinating to look at characters like this who have been around for so long and see the different hands that have helped shape them. Now, I could only find one letter referencing this, unfortunately. It's from issue 330, where it also advertised that some people got the edition early because they were subscribers, so they got to see the new look before it hit the newsstands. So subscribe, everybody. Like and subscribe. Now, there's one letter here that does mention the gun, and that reader liked it. Dear editor, the May Detective Comics was probably one of the best Batman group comics I've ever read. I've been reading your good comics for at least 8 years now. Shots fired, only the good ones. And this one was exceptional. The cover really caught my eye. That new title heading was a good change, as was the cover art itself. The Batman was extraordinary in both art and story. So my congratulations to Infantino, Giella, and John Broome. One thing that caught my fancy was Batman holding a gun on the crooks. I hope that happens often. All in all, I feel that this issue will become a collector's item. Joe Murray Jr. Why do you want him to hold guns on more people, Joe? There is also another really funny letter, but it doesn't pertain to the gun, so I will save it till the end, but I will read it to you. Stick around. It's wonderful. It's really interesting to see Schwartz note and accept this error and just embrace it as part of the process and growing into working on Batman. Because Schwartz does become heavily invested in the character. It just takes a moment to get up to speed. It's really fascinating to hear him discuss it. Here's another thing he stated about his changes on the era. As I became more acquainted with the Batman character and his legacies, I realized that I was going to have to make a few changes, much in the same way I did when I had taken over other established characters. By my estimation, the Batman in the years prior to my tenure had strayed away from the original roots of the character. Batman was regarded as the world's greatest detective, so I decided that he should return to his dark mystery roots. Also, could you imagine if this era had occurred time of recording? All the posts about it? Oof, you know it would have been a lot, because you know they got letters about this that they didn't print. Gosh, I wish they had. I want to read them, but let's finish the issue. Why were they being frozen? Well, get ready. This is the Silver Age shenanigans. They were being frozen because the phosphorus was an invisible radioactive imprint that reacted to an energy signal released by a mechanical device in Fenton's pocket, and that affected the motor centers of Batman and Robin's brains. Why not? Let's do it. But wait, there's more. Smiler wasn't just any criminal, he was the chairman of the Preservation Committee. Le gasp, as a cunningly contrived mask is removed. I guess this was the menacing mask. It was smiling at everybody. Roland Beecham of the Committee to Preserve Gotham Village? The double dealer. He was trying to save Gotham Village only to prevent its underground setup here from being discovered. And he would have gotten away with it if it weren't for those meddling vigilantes. I actually like this reveal a lot. It added an interesting layer to the debate about Gotham Village and preserving it, even though it doesn't address it, but it's still there. By showing how people can attach themselves to causes for their own gains. You always gotta question everything. Rule number 1, trust no one. Oh, and Jimmy wasn't a criminal. He was just trying to investigate the criminal underground to take it out single-handedly so that him and his fiance could still live there. And now I guess they can, because that solves all crime. Yay. Also, Bruce hints that he wants an invite to the wedding. Trenchcoat duo out. The end. And now you know the reason why Batman was threatening a group of villains with a gun. This is just an interesting moment, and this issue is just significant, but it doesn't often get mentioned when you're talking about seminal or important Batman issues. Schwartz would go on to be lauded for the changes he made to Batman that would allow him to evolve into later forms. He helped to guide Batman through the latter half of the Silver Age and into the Bronze. It's just interesting to see that what would end up becoming a strong period for Batman started with such a big error. Can you imagine if they doubled down and just been like, nah, he holds guns now, he shoots now? What a different era that would have been. I mean, that couldn't have happened because of the code, but it's amusing to entertain that alternate reality. Now, even though this panel is just one panel, it elicits a response. The Red Danger background really sends it home. So in conclusion, there are lots of interesting small moments that get lost over time. They're fun to talk about, and I like highlighting them. Also, if you have some time, give Man of Two Worlds a read. It's interesting. Batman holding a gun. Just based on how the character evolved, it's always odd. So yeah, cursed. Now, as promised, the letter. I hope you like a rage. Dear editor, all I have to say can be concentrated into one word. Ouch. The artwork for Mystery of the Menacing Mask in the May Detective was the worst that I have ever seen in my comic book reading life. Batman looked nothing like the Batman I've been reading for 7 years. Or another way of putting that, that's not my Batman. Robin looked nothing like himself. The background in each panel was entirely too light. The plot was hard to follow. They usually are when they aren't so hot and are accompanied by lousy artwork. I feel the need to argue with this letter. The plot was many things. Hard to follow was not one of them. The insignia on Batman's chest took a turn for the worse. To quote quote you, longtime readers of Detective Comics, me, have done a double take. True, but mine was from shock. When they saw the current issue of this magazine, I did more than the double take. I exploded. Please print this letter to show that not everyone likes your art. In fact, print one letter showing that someone prefers this new art to the old art if one comes in. Brit Mayo. And they argue back. Hold on. To set the record straight, there was an extraordinary amount of mail on May Detective, running about 4-1 in favor of the changes, which frankly is better than we expected. There'll always be the diehards who resist any change, and we can always count on the nostalgic type who fancies that nothing in comics published today can ever match the so-called golden era of comics. This is why I love reading these. Isn't this fascinating? This is just like an exchange that you could read time of recording. It's the same energy. I love it. They're not done fighting back against Brit though. Our overall aim was to generate some excitement about Batman, and in that we've succeeded. But let us not overlook the other new element added to this magazine, the elongated man. That answer is so thug life, deal with it. But also, I appreciate that they printed the letter. They were a bit salty in the reply, but it was also a pretty salty letter. I've seen the replies go harder. That's what's missing in modern letters columns. Genuinely annoyed negative feedback. I mean, I guess some of it's too vitriolic to print, but I'm sure that was always the case. Although maybe they cussed less back in the day. I don't know. People seem to have a bit more couth, a bit more creativity placed into the insults, and that makes them hurt more. They're so, ooh, they get into your soul. I just wanted to share that with you. I just enjoy the whole print this, you cowards energy. Now, what are some interesting moments from comics past that you feel are overlooked? Share them down below. I'd love to hear them. Batman with a gun, yay or nay? Share your thoughts and please do all the YouTube things. Like, subscribe, hit that bell notification so that you never miss a vid. Thanks so much for taking some time today to spend discussing comics with me. I always appreciate it, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.